The following presentation is part of the Technology and the Corporation Conference Series, sponsored by MIT's Industrial Liaison Program.
I have been with General Motors for over 30 years. I started there right in college, so I've been with the company through really good times and really difficult times. So I thought what I'd do this afternoon is just share some perspectives with you. There's probably a lot of people here in the room that, you know, maybe you were supportive, maybe you weren't supportive of the government stepping in and loaning us money and doing the whole share transaction. So, you know, obviously there's a lot of controversy around that subject. But what I want to do today was give you some of my thoughts on why it was important and why it is important to maintain a strong manufacturing base in the United States. Well, I plan to speak for maybe 20, 25 minutes or so, 30 at the longest, and then open it up for Q&A. So please be thinking of your questions. I'm happy to try to answer any of them to the best of my ability. I know it's after lunch, so I'll try to keep it somewhat entertaining for you so you're not all dozing off, because it's tough to have a nice lunch and then come back and sit in an auditorium. Okay, so with that, everything begins and ends with great products. You know, on the manufacturing side, we have nothing to produce if nobody wants to buy our products, right? So you got to have the right products in the marketplace. And I think General Motors went through a period of time where we didn't always have the right products in the marketplace. And you can't save your way to success by cutting costs. You're just never going to keep up. So the importance of having the right products out in the marketplace that people want to buy is certainly something that the company has embraced. So, as I said, I want to talk about why does manufacturing matter. I assume that the audience here, most of you agree with that statement, or you probably wouldn't be attending this session. So hopefully you agree with this, and as I said, these are just some of my perspectives on why it matters. So I tried to break it initially into three categories here, and I want to talk about each one of those: innovation and advanced technology, stimulating growth in and other industries, and then economic sustainability. And I'll talk about each one of those. So first of all, in the area of R&D, General Motors in 2011 invested $7 to $8 billion in R&D. $7 to $8 billion in R&D, from everything from connected radios in vehicles to the technology that's in the battery in the Volt. And so you can imagine $7 to $8 billion of R&D investment. I think that the automotive companies account for the majority of R&D investment in the United States. So this, we think, is critical piece of our economy, and particularly at an institution like MIT, which has you know, a great deal of brain power here. That having that in fundamental industrial brain power and R&D in the United States is really critical to us as a country and our success. General Motors secured last year over 1,100 patents for new technologies and innovation. So very significant impact in the area of advanced technology. In addition to that, so in other spending, not R&D spending, but just to purchase the materials that go into our vehicles, we purchase $41.6 billion of materials. $41.6 billion of materials. And now you think about that, how many people that impacted and what they would do with that money then in the rest of the consumer goods that they purchase. So in our vehicles, we have over 2,000 parts in every vehicle that we buy from somebody. And it could be a first tier, a second tier, a third tier supplier, but $41.6 billion. Some say, and I suppose you could argue with the statistic, that for every dollar that we spend, there's another $1.35 spent elsewhere in the economy supporting that dollar that we spend. In addition to R&D and what I've talked about here, you know, there is this issue of economic sustainability. I know I'm from Michigan, and Michigan is a huge auto industry. And if the auto companies would have gone down in Michigan, certainly the ripple in the economy in the Midwest would have been huge. Just since our bankruptcy, since coming out of bankruptcy, we've invested $7.1 billion in our facilities. So that means new equipment, new facilities, that means contractors, that means growth in the I guess, regrowth in the industry supporting that machinery, equipment, and facilities going into our plants. We created or retained 18,000 jobs. So if you believe the direct to indirect ratio, let's just say it's 2 to 3 times that of the jobs that are created. And some people would speculate it's 10 times that. I don't know what the right number is. But so 18,000 jobs, multiply that by whatever number makes you happy, and you can see certainly that there's a huge impact in terms of economic sustainability. So why the auto industry? I mean, okay, manufacturing maybe is important, but why cars and trucks? Why not something else? Is that really the industry that we want to be in? So I wanted to make a few points with you relative to that today. The first is that the automotive industry is very complex. We do everything from melting raw material all the way through the process of stamping material, engine and transmission production and assembly and machining, all the way through final vehicle assembly. So when you think about that whole chain of value creation and you think about the technology that's needed and the processes that are needed and the training of the workforce that's needed, it's a great industry that covers a wide breadth of different skills that are necessary. And so there aren't very many other industries that start that basic and go all the way to the final product at the end of the day. So it's one of the ones that I think is why you see those value chains and the creation of the additional jobs that come about for every job in vehicle manufacturing. Demands for extremely high levels of reliability and durability. Okay, so how many of you get up? How many of you drive every day somewhere? Okay, most of you. I know not everybody does, but most people do. And you expect when you start your car that it's going to go, right? It's going to start and it's going to get you where you want to go. And you expect that to happen for how long? How many years? How many years? 10, 12, 10? Well, we hope you'll keep it less than that, really. We'd like you to buy new ones, but we want it to last longer than that, okay? And so I wanted to talk a little bit about that. Highly skilled employees are needed. We need people, if you think about that whole value chain, we need people that can do jobs all the way from the beginning all the way to the end. And one of the things that's certainly changed in manufacturing is the technology that is in each of these jobs. We need people that not only have engineering degrees, but are specialists in paint application techniques and understand the chemistry behind paint. And what can we do to provide a better product that lasts longer, as well as employees that are skilled in managing others and leading people. We expect people to come in from all the way the shop floor up and be able to work well with others in a team. We want to use their brain, not just their hands. And so, when I think about the gaps, I think there are certainly technology gaps that need to be filled, but I also think there's leadership gaps that need to be filled. And when you think about a vocational program and maybe the education that provided in the past, not a lot of leadership skill in vocational programs. And that's a big gap in my opinion, because everybody now has the opportunity to participate fully in the business that maybe they didn't have in the past. And then the other thing that I think is different about the auto industry is there's lots of regulations. And there's a lot of politics involved in, what should the fuel economy standards be? And should it vary from state to state? Should the federal government set, and what if they set a fuel economy standard, but people don't want to buy the kind of cars that get that fuel economy? Then what? So as a company, we invest a lot of money in that, but nobody wants to purchase it because they still want to drive something different. And how do we make a truck or an SUV, which there's a huge market for that, how do we make that meet the fuel economy standards that are coming out from the government? So when you think about the complexities that adds to the business, it's very significant. And again, that matters to us as a country on what are the alternatives that we're going to choose relative to propulsion, and are we going to go with electric vehicles? And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. I've had the opportunity, because I've been with the company for so long, I've had the opportunity to have a lot of new people come into the company and to be able to introduce them to manufacturing. And so I take them out to the plants and I show them what we do every day around the world in 170 plants. And the thing that people are very impressed with is they never really realized how complex it is to build an automobile. In fact, one of the first times Ed Whitaker was our CEO, and he had come in and he wanted a chart to show the board on manufacturing process. On one page, he wanted us to show what we do in manufacturing. We said, well, that's impossible. We don't know how to do that. So what we ended up doing was actually showing material in, process, car out the end. You know, that's not exactly how it works, but that sufficed for, I guess, what he wanted to know. But it's, you know, it's very complicated, the business that we're in, and very complex, and requires all of the things that I just talked about. So I thought maybe I'd just switch a little bit and talk about, so what makes a manufacturing company successful? Again, this is all my opinion, so I had the right of the pen. I could write whatever I wanted here. So these are my thoughts relative to fundamentals for success from a manufacturing standpoint. The first one that we learned is you have to have the right capacity. Right capacity is expensive, costs you a lot of money. When you install it, you want to make sure that you've spent your money well and that you use it. The second is complexity reduction. We need to make, because it is a very complex business, just in the nature of what the work you're doing, we need to make it simple. We need to make sure we're flexible. And obviously, as we talked about, you want to keep your cars for a long time. You want them to run and do well every day. So you want quality, and then the engagement of people. So I want to talk a little bit more about each one of those items. First, on capacity. Obviously, we need to have a good product plan. As I said, you know, great products at the end of the day, that's what we need, or there's no point. We have nothing to make. But we want to make sure that we've lined up capacity with a product plan. I'm always telling my team that if sales says they can sell another one profitably, we need to figure out how to make it. And so having the right capacity, when we went through bankruptcy, we closed a lot of plants. In North America specifically, we had overcapacity. When you have overcapacity, that drives you to want to build things to fill it up, to best use your assets, which means then you start discounting your prices, which means then the whole value equation changes for you as a company. So one of the things we did was right-size our capacity. We set ourselves up so that we could break even in any future downturn of the cycle, which, you know, we got down to under 10 million units of auto sales. And so we sized ourselves so we could break even at that point. We also sized ourselves so that if the market recovered into that 15 to 16 million unit market, we had enough capacity to do what we needed to do. Right now, we're in the low 14s, so still some room to do, but you have to have the right capacity. You have to be able to anticipate not only what you currently need, but what you're going to need in the future and how to best utilize that capacity. And then you have to run it, and you have to run it flat out. There are, sometimes I get the question on how can you run a manufacturing plant 3 shifts? It's impossible. You have to do maintenance. It's not impossible, and I'll show you one example of that. We need to, if you're going to spend $500 million, or in some cases $1 billion on a facility, you're going to want to run it, right? If you owned it, you'd run it all the time, and you would find creative ways to do your maintenance during those few windows that you have in your facility. So utilizing your facility and utilizing your assets the best you can is certainly a critical success factor. The second one I want to talk about was complexity reduction. As we went through the bankruptcy process, we had 8 brands. We reduced it to 4 to really provide more focus. We had so many different products under so many different brands, it's hard to really make any of them outstanding. We feel now we've got ourselves positioned right for 4 brands that we can really focus our engineering talents as well as our marketing and sales talents. So here's just a couple examples. This one has to do with the number of vehicle architectures. In 2010, we had 30 different vehicle architectures around the world that we used as the basis for all of the models that we produced. In 2014, we'll have 24, and in 2018, we'll have 14. What this means for us in manufacturing is the fewer in architecture, I'm talking about the undersides of the car, not that the consumers see, but the base structure of how the vehicle is built underneath. From a manufacturing standpoint, that allows us some flexibility in terms of what we make in our plants because the architectures are the same. That doesn't mean the product is the same. Certainly they're highly differentiated from the performance, the brand characteristics, what the consumer is going to see and feel, you know, the interior, the exterior, they can look different. This is just how the underbody and the structure is built. So you can see that's a really good example of complexity reduction. Another big area is engines. You can see this chart here, reducing the number of engines. Now this is particularly challenging in light of what I talked about with the fuel economy standards. We got to have engines that have performance, but that get outstanding fuel economy. So as we continue to rationalize our portfolio, you can imagine what's happening, right? We're going from lots of different engines, including lots of V8s and big diesel engines, down to much smaller, much more fuel-efficient vehicles, engines that get the same kind of performance. So that's the goal, is to reduce those virtually in half. And again, from a manufacturing standpoint, that means certainly it's much easier for us to build and assemble and test those engines in our plants. So the next thing I want to talk about is flexibility. I've mentioned that a little bit now, but I wanted to talk more specifically. The days of having a product that sells 400,000 units in any particular market, there are very few products that do that today. It's a much more fragmented marketplace, and it means that volumes of any particular model are much more variable. So one of the challenges for us from a manufacturing standpoint is we can't set up as many dedicated plants that they only build this model vehicle and that's all they build. We need to set up plants that can build multiple models, and we need to put the same model into multiple plants. That's what gives us the flexibility to respond to the market needs. I mean, you're familiar with the product cycles of a vehicle. When it comes out, a new vehicle generally sells really well, right? And then over its lifetime, which is, let's say, 6 to 7 years, the sales kind of taper off towards the end. So from a manufacturing standpoint, we need to make sure that we are protecting for that, and that we've got enough flexibility in what we're building where. We're going to have one of our plants, this happens to be Fairfax, where we're going to build the new Malibu in both Fairfax and in Detroit-Hamtramck. And there are other products that will be in Detroit-Hamtramck, so that's going to be a flex valve that will allow us, as the Malibu demand goes up and down, we can respond to that, and with other products that we have in that plant, it allows us to still balance the production that we have in any one facility. I talked a little bit about maintenance, and the Fairfax, which is in Kansas, the example that I have there is we had a conveyor chain, the main conveyor chain through the whole plant, that was in bad need of repair. I mean, we needed to spend some money. Obviously, we'd been through bankruptcy. We weren't going to spend any money. You know, repairing our facilities, we're going to spend as little as possible. Well, this chain needed to be replaced. Typically what happened was we would shut down. And maybe we'd take a week and we'd replace this chain. Maybe 2 weeks it would take, and we'd try to do it during a shutdown period. But Fairfax was running 3 shifts, flat out. So they don't have any time to run that chain. So what they did is the team actually came up with a way. They rebuilt 1.3 miles of chain while we were running. They did it in little tiny bits. And so you just go in, replace the little section. And if you think about that, actually it's a preferred way to do it, because when you take the whole chain out and you replace the whole thing at the same time, what do you think happens when you go to start up that first day? It doesn't always work exactly as you intended. So in this case, doing it bit by bit, actually you could test each of those pieces as you went. And if you had a problem, it was very easy to correct because you'd only done a certain section of the conveyor. So it actually worked out very well. The team was very proud, and we have tons of examples where the team is creative, because actually people love the problem of running flat out. And it's a lot better than the situation we were in a few years ago where you didn't have anything to make. And so people love the challenge, and the creativity is amazing when you say, well, I know you need that new paint booth, but we need to run 3 shifts, so figure out how to do it. And they'll come up with ways to do it in modules and a piece at a time, and slip a section of it in on the weekend. So I think it's actually been very good for the organization to have that kind of flexibility. The next success factor is certainly quality. And I want to talk a little bit about quality. Certainly you have to design quality in, and there's a huge activity in General Motors from a product standpoint to integrate and think about quality of the end vehicle, and it goes through our whole processes. But I want to talk about here quality from a manufacturing standpoint. Our big focus is really to enable the operators in all of our plants to build quality in stations so that no defects ever leave them and move on to the next phase of the process. So how do we do that? We make sure that they have the tools they need, that they have error proofing built in their station, that the right parts are presented to them so that they can build a quality product, and that if they have a problem, they can stop the line, pull the end-on cord, get somebody over there to help them, and fix it in station. So we have a very big initiative going on now in General Motors with some specific targets this year on what we expect around here. And it's really all about building consistent quality every day. You know, in manufacturing, we like to measure everything, right? So I'm just giving you the words for it, but believe me, we have hardcore metrics on everything that plants have to achieve to show that they are building consistent quality in station every day on all of our shifts in all of our plants. And of course, at the end of the day, what matters is, do we get people to buy our product? So this is just an example of a 10-year Toyota owner who switched to a GMC and just loves the product. So I know there's probably some big Toyota fans in here, and that's okay. But any vehicles, sales that we can steal from other people and come over to us and keep them, you know, obviously we're in business to do that. The second thing I want to talk about on quality was really customer assistance. Because vehicles are very complicated, sometimes people do need assistance. There's an issue that happened, and we have a whole work stream going on the kind of assistance that we provide to customers, because, you know, we certainly realize that we need to be a much more customer-focused organization. And this has not always been one of the things that we have been terrific at, so we need to revamp our whole customer experience when they come into a dealership. In fact, a couple weeks ago, I had the opportunity to go to Disney and I wasn't there on vacation, although it kind of felt a little bit like it because the weather was good and we got to see Mickey Mouse, but we were there really to study what Disney does relative to their customer experience and what can we do at Chevrolet to provide more of that type of an experience. I mean, not too many people go home unhappy from Disney, right? Maybe tired, but not unhappy. So one example that I wanted to use to kind of bring this to life is on the Chevy Malibu, which is a new vehicle that we just launched. There was a huge team of people working on making the Malibu the quietest vehicle out there. And they worked on reducing wind noise and reducing air leakage and putting in the right kind of windshield and glass to put sound baffles in and sound deadening. And my proof point on this one, actually it happened yesterday. I got an email from a friend who had just referred another friend. They were interested in looking at a GM product, and they just happened to buy a Malibu. And the comment that came back to me unsolicited was they were absolutely thrilled with their Malibu at how quiet it was. And they traded in a Kia, by the way, so we were even more happy that they turned in a Kia to get a Malibu. So things like this, you know, really do make an impact. I didn't set them up for it. I didn't say, hey, tell me what you think about the noise. Nothing. It was completely unsolicited. I didn't taint the waters at all on that one. And probably the most important success factor that I listed here is people and the engagement and how people are helping us in the business. Certainly one of the things that we learned through bankruptcy is that, you know, we're all in this together and that we almost went out of business. If not for the deals that were cut relative to providing funding for us, we would have been gone. And I think the whole workforce that works at General Motors is well aware of that. Some of the portrayal on the news of what it was like in our plants really was extremely inaccurate in my opinion. So one of the things that we did last year is we mandated at every facility in the U.S. and really in North America, they would have an open house. They would open their doors to the community and let people come in and see what happens in a plant. And in most cases, the plant was running. And so, you know, we had to make sure that people were safe, but they could actually come in and see what happened in the plant. They could talk to people, take a tour. We had 90,000 visitors come into our plants. 90,000, and see what it was like. In addition to that, we combined it with some community donations to, you know, charities and to make kind of an event out of it as well. The other thing that we did is we brought in 900 Buick and GMC dealers into one of our plants in Lansing that happens to make the Acadia product that they were very interested in getting more of. 900 dealers. You know, most of those dealers had never been in a plant before. They had no idea what it took to make one of their products, and they came away extremely impressed with the dedication of the workforce, the skills necessarily, the quality focus. And so it was really our way to kind of help change people's perceptions of what it's like to work in a General Motors plant and really any of the auto companies today versus the perception of maybe 30 years ago that was portrayed by the news during the whole controversial time. So now what I want to do is just relate all of that to a specific example and talk about our Orion assembly plant. So this is where we applied all those things I just told you about to one specific location. The Orion assembly plant, we build the Chevy Sonic and the Buick Verano. Did any of you get a chance to see the Chevy Sonic when you had lunch today? If you missed it, then you probably didn't go over for lunch, because I understand it's quite visible sitting there, right? But we are the only company making a subcompact vehicle in the United States. And we make this in Michigan with the UAW workforce successfully. We introduced it last year. We are very proud to have done that. Most people said we couldn't do it. It took a lot of things, and I'm going to talk about some of the things that it took for us to be able to do that successfully. It cost us about $500 million of investment. We took a brownfield site and we put in a new paint shop. That's where most of the money went, but we made some other changes. We retrained the workforce. Many of the employees had worked there before, so that wasn't like they were brand new, although we did get some new employees in. And then we installed a lot of equipment, but $500 million of investment. We cut our production line in half, which was the equivalent of like 2 huge supermarkets that we took out of the floor space that we needed for our facility. We put in more compact stages in our manufacturing process. We put in automated carts that are provided by suppliers. So we have suppliers on site kitting our material, that then we have carts that take it around. We have carts that hook onto the vehicles as they go down the line. So the operator, again, if you think about building quality and station, so the operators don't have to try to guess what parts they're going to get. It's presented to them. It's in a kit. They know what part they have to take. If there's not a part there, they're probably missing something, and they should pull the Anton cord, right? If there's 2 parts, there's a problem. It's really easy for them to see if they've got the right parts to do the job. As I said, we put in our new paint shop. We reduced our energy costs by 50%. We reduced our water costs by 20%. Our components come from land-free plants. So we really tried to be green in what we did. And if you think about it, manufacturing is not always thought of as a green, but there's lots of ways that we can be green in our manufacturing facilities, and we tried to do that in everything that we did at Orion Assembly. Our energy costs alone, we reduced just the lighting costs by $400,000 a year just for lighting. By upgrading the lighting, putting a different type of bulb in, $400,000 just in the lighting bill. We also, and this is one of my favorite examples, reduce complexity. From a manufacturing standpoint, this is near and dear to my heart. In the prior model that we had 600 different combinations that people could physically order of the vehicle. So if you went to a dealer to buy an Aveo, you had 600 different choices you could make. Well, first of all, as a consumer, 600 different choices? I wouldn't even know what to pick. So that was changed with the Sonic that came out to 48. So now there's only 4, and most of them come in packages, so you can pick, the basic package, the mid-level, and the high-level package. 40 different combinations. Think about that from a part presentation for the operators online, how much easier that is for an operator to only have 48 combinations to deal with instead of 60. So a huge improvement in complexity. And then the last one I wanted to talk about was workforce flexibility. I think tomorrow, Cindy Estrada from the UAW, Denise Johnson from Caterpillar, we're going to be in a panel talking about things, and you can ask me any questions today or you can ask questions tomorrow for the panel. But the UAW really came to the party in terms of workforce flexibility with our Orion assembly plant. They helped us get a second tier, an entry-level wage for actually a large percentage of the workforce, and it could grow as people attrit and move out to other things, to 100% of the workforce. At 100% of the workforce at an entry-level wage, that would make us cheaper than any other automotive manufacturer, including all of the non-unionized ones in the United States. So imagine that, with the UAW coming to that type of an agreement. So it's not just about the wages, it's also about how people do their work. And production people doing what, you've heard the joke about how many, skilled trades you need to change a light bulb, right? Well, I can tell you none of that happens at General Motors. It's all anything that can be done by a production worker safely that they have the skills and ability to do, they do. And we only need the skilled tradespeople for technical things that they've been specially trained to do. So it's not just about wages, it's also about flexibility. So there's a picture of the Sonic. It's doing extremely well for a new nameplate in the marketplace so far this year. We've sold 28,000 of them. And we expect that number to just continue to grow. It's a cute, sporty little model. And if you ever get a chance to sit inside, it's so roomy, it's unbelievable for a small car. If you're tall, and I know you're probably not going to take my word for this, but if you're tall, you actually can fit nicely in there, and you still have headroom and legroom. So we know we got a second chance as a company. We had our bankruptcy in 2009. We had our initial public offering in November 18th of 2010. I'm happy to say that we have now had 9 consecutive quarters of profitability, and we're doing very well as a company. Whether you supported it or not, we thank you. And we know that what our job is, and we believe that we are on the right track to deliver that. I think that without manufacturing, and you know, almost any other country in the world actually supports their manufacturing and their auto manufacturing. It was quite interesting to watch us as a country debate that and whether we should support the auto industry or not. So anyway, we think it's really critical. Before I leave the presentation and open it up, though, I did want to present a couple challenges because I know there's a lot of really intelligent, well-educated people in the room, and I wanted you to think about these things as it relates to the auto industry. The first one is defining regulatory standards. What are the standards that we want for fuel economy? What should the role of government be in that versus consumers? You know, if it's government driven, what if consumers don't want to buy that? What is the right thing to do? And, you know, we have states that try to define their own regulations. Imagine as a car company trying to produce just specific models to meet those requirements for each different state. You know, all that complexity stuff I just talked about, just throw it away. Because imagine the complexity then of trying to produce all those different vehicles. So far we've been successful, but you know, I'd ask you to think about the regulatory environment and what that means for a company that produces automobiles. The second one I'd ask you to think about is alternative fuel, the infrastructure. So what are we going to do? Are we going to electricity as a nation? How about compressed natural gas? Anybody for that? Okay, one. How about fuel cells? We're going to do fuel cells, hydrogen fuel cells? And so right now we have no infrastructure for any of that, right? How many electric charging stations are there on this campus? Anybody know? Any? A few? Nobody know? I don't know. I don't have the answer to that either. But the point is that if we're going to go to electricity, and if the government is, you know, incentivizing to go to electricity, first of all, it's very expensive as a automotive company to develop the technology for that. But secondly, the consumers have to want it, right? Anybody in here from the oil companies? Petroleum? Okay, so if you're in that business, how eager are you going to be to put in electric charging station infrastructure? It's probably not on the top of your list unless you're going to somehow take control of that, right? So questions around what is the infrastructure going to support? Some governments in some countries are really rallying around that, and they've decided to put in electric charging stations and put that infrastructure in their country. We haven't decided yet, and you know, there's the whole role of what should government do versus the private sector. I can tell you as a company, any company, even all the companies together making automobiles, we could not afford to put in the electric charging infrastructure that the nation would need, or compressed natural gas charging infrastructure, or fuel cell infrastructure. So there's some things that we need to do as a country to decide where we want to go with that. The third challenge is always cost containment. Cost of raw materials continues to go up. Certainly, you know, the cost of doing business continues to go up. The vehicles get a lot more high tech, which costs money, so we need to think about what are we going to do to keep taking cost out, because like all of us, right, I mean, we only want to pay so much for a vehicle, and actually, if the vehicle cost would go down, the price would go down instead of up, we'd all be happier with that. The fourth one I want to talk about was supply chain interruption. We had some significant interruptions in our supply chain. We had an event just happen in Germany with a fire just a couple weeks ago. So thinking about where are we getting our parts, where are they concentrated? I think the tsunami and earthquake in Japan hit all of us by surprise. I don't think we had quite realized the concentration of these electronic chips in such a small area of one country in the world. And when that went out, we're done. Certainly that has awakened us to think about diversifying locations and where we're putting various critical components for the vehicles, but I don't think we'd quite realized that. So thinking about the impact of supply chain disruption and how it can shut an industry down pretty quick. And Toyota is now, I mean, they were hit the hardest, and they are still recovering from that. The next one is really the technical skills I talked a little bit about. I mean, we need paint experts, we need battery experts, we need fuel cell experts, and we need great leaders. And we need people that are team players and people that know how to lead other people and people that have great problem-solving skills and understand a quality ethic. So, the whole gamut. If somebody talked to me, actually, I was at another university, at my other alma mater at Kettering, and I was there for their graduation ceremony, and a young guy came up to me. He had just graduated. He had his mother and his sister there. And he said, he saw I was driving a Volt. And he said, oh, I love that car. And he came to talk to me. And he didn't say it. It was his sister who started and said, well, my brother's always wanted to work for General Motors and to work on batteries. And then his mother piped in and said, yes, that's the same thing he's told me. And then he piped in and said, yes, I've always wanted to work for General Motors. So we have, and actually we hired him. Hey, you don't turn down a good thing, right? And he now works in our battery labs. But so we have people that want to come and work in the auto industry. I would just encourage all of you to help people understand it's not the old industry of the past. There's a lot of really high-tech jobs in the auto industry, and it's one of the most challenging. The profit margins are so thin that it's really challenging and demanding. So, if they're up for the challenge, they like the technology, there are great career opportunities, and we need the technical skills. And then the last thing I would ask you to think about, it's when you look at the equation of where do you build a product, do you build it in the US, do you build it overseas, it's not just labor cost, right? Labor cost is less than 10% of our total cost. So you got to think about the total cost that it takes to bring that vehicle to market. Whether it's transportation costs. I mean, General Motors at any one time, we have a lot of money sitting on boats, working its way over to us from various places in the world. We need to take a look at that whole equation and make sure that we are making the right decision in terms of generally trying to build where we're going to sell. That overall seems to be the cheapest equation for us, and that's certainly the focus that we have. Certainly when you have a low volume product, you can't do that. You don't want to spend the investment to put in a facility to make 10,000 units of something. But generally that appears to be the best alternative. So I just wanted to make that point that it's not just labor cost. That's actually a very small piece of the equation, the total equation on what it costs. So I think there's great hope for us in manufacturing in the U.S. I thank you for the opportunity. It's nice to be back here at my alma mater. Glad to be here to do this today and to have a chance to talk about manufacturing in the U.S.